I speak in the name of a loving God, our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Please be seated. Well, good morning. My name is Andrew Suter, and I have the honor of serving as rector of the loveliest parish in a little town called Sudbury, about 18 miles from here, or 45 minutes by car. And if you avoid Boston traffic and potholes, you can make it in under an hour. I'm grateful to the dean for the invitation to be here. At the same time, right now, she's probably getting into my pulpit. So I'm delighted to be here with all of you and to have Amy and her gifts shared with my parish this weekend as well. I also have the privilege of serving on Cathedral Chapter for the last 3 years and recently began a 1-year term as chapter president with Jen Hopcroft. And one thing I've learned over my ministry is that cathedrals and parishes alike are constantly making decisions about who they are called to be and how they are called to love their neighbor. And very often, faith communities approach that work in one of two ways. They either react to every opportunity and challenge, or they respond to every opportunity and challenge. And there's a big difference. So before anything else, I want to thank you for embracing the particular vocation of this cathedral. Again and again, you choose to respond rather than react to ministry. You show up and you open your doors and you seek to love well all those who call this place home. That kind of ministry requires trust with your neighbor and your neighborhood. It requires confidence. And it requires a willingness to follow God beyond what is always comfortable. Which brings us to our readings today. In our first lesson, Abram is told, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you." Do you notice what God doesn't do? God doesn't give Abram a roadmap. He does not explain the plan. He doesn't even give him the destination. He simply says, "Go." And so Abram goes. And that pattern continues through our readings. In Romans, Paul reflects on Abraham's faith. Not as certainty about any outcomes, but as trust in the one who has called him. Abraham believes promises that seem nearly impossible, but he entrusts himself to a future called by God. And in Matthew's gospel, Jesus calls Matthew away from his tax booth, a lucrative position that afforded him great comfort, a fabulous income, but always some level of personal compromise. And Jesus offers no strategic plan. We love a good strategic plan. He offers him no roadmap of what life following Christ would look like. Just the words, "Follow me." And somehow that is enough for Matthew to leave his career and follow Jesus. And before the end of Matthew's reading, mid-mission, Jesus is interrupted by some folks just looking for help. Sometimes when people ask what I do, I say, I answer emails. And on some days, that feels so far removed from ministry. But then an email arrives about a broken dream, or a new opportunity, a difficult diagnosis, a prayer request, and sometimes even a moment of unexpected joy. And it's in these moments that I'm reminded that what often feels like an interruption is frequently where ministry happens. Right? The things that seem to pull us away from our plans are often the very places God is calling us to pay attention. Even Jesus, whose clarity of mission we trust, finds himself politely interrupted. A desperate father pleads for his daughter. A woman who has exhausted every remedy she knows reaches for the hem of his cloak. No speech, no plan, no certainty, just faith reaching out. Neither situation controllable. Both are marked by fear, by a vulnerability, by some level of uncertainty. And yet Jesus responds with compassion. And life is restored where limits once stood. That's where these readings meet us. Cathedrals are asked to live this way. And by doing so, they take on the mantle of Abram and Paul and Matthew. You show up for those who come simply to touch a garment of some sort, trusting that God is already at work for them and in their city, in our city. Because mission for the church often arrives disguised. And when it does, St. Paul's responds faithfully rather than reacting hastily. For the last several months, I've had the joy of serving at Manna. It is probably the highlight of my month. My parish now prepares a meal for Fifth Mondays, and it's through ministries like Manna, Ministry of the Steps, worship at this altar, conversations over coffee, quiet pastoral care, and more, that this congregation reminds us that ministry is rarely divided between the sacred and the ordinary and the ways that we imagine it. Christ meets people in all of this. And to me, that's where this cathedral's vocation becomes so clear. So I want to thank you for embracing the peculiar vocation of this cathedral. Thank you for understanding that this cathedral exists not only for those who worship here on Sunday mornings, but for the whole city that surrounds us. This month, the cathedral joins our city in celebrating Pride. And that witness is especially visible as we continue proclaiming that every person bears the image of God and is worthy of dignity and belonging and love. Not many churches are built overlooking a state house, a place charged with shaping laws for common good and protecting human dignity. And sometimes it succeeds beautifully, other times less so. Yet our mission as the church, right across the street, remains simple: to be a house of prayer for all people. That includes honoring the dignity of every human being and leaving people better than we found them. That includes the housed and the unhoused, the resourced and the under-resourced, and everybody in between. Some days it may look like feeding one another. Other days it looks like advocating for someone and showing up when you're needed. Many days it is just careful listening and looking for Christ in the eyes looking at you. And for that witness, for your willingness to keep showing up for this city, this diocese, and all who come seeking a grace, I am deeply grateful. Because sometimes that work is really challenging work. And in this day and age, the needs can seem so abundant. And it's easy to wonder if we make a drop in the bucket. In the sea of great needs where answers are rarely simple. We faith communities cannot always control the outcomes we set out to address. Because faith is not the confidence that we can fix everything. Faith is the confidence that God is present in what we cannot always fix. Abram could not see the destination. Matthew could not control what following would require. The woman could not control her illness. The ruler could not even hold death back. But each encountered God through trust, not control or certainty or comfort. Perhaps the question before us is not, can we solve every problem before us? Perhaps the question is simpler. Can we remain faithful? Can we continue to see Christ in our neighbor? Can we continue to love when outcomes are uncertain? Can we continue to hope when progress is slow? And just keep showing up? Because if we're honest, I believe showing up is sometimes the hardest discipline of all. Abraham went not knowing where he was going. Matthew rose not knowing what would become. The woman reached out not knowing if she would be taken seriously and healed. And we continue forward, not knowing what comes with tomorrow, but walking with the one who calls us. The world will always contain what is beyond our control. But the love of God is never beyond our reach. And so we continue the journey, not at all because we know where it leads, but because we trust the one who calls us. And in that faithfulness, this cathedral bears witness to the city, and to this diocese, and to all who enter these doors, that God's love is still at work. May it be so today and always. Amen.